Korean Mafia boss saw his black waitress hiding bruises. What he did next shocked the entire city. One quiet night inside a high-end downtown restaurant, Kang Min-Jae was calmly overseeing another flawless service after an exhausting day. The warm lights, soft music, and polished atmosphere felt completely routine until his black waitress nervously pulled down her sleeve. For a brief second, dark bruises were visible on her wrist. Min-Jae froze. In that moment, he realized something was very wrong. He had no idea that what he just noticed would force him to break his own rules, confront a hidden truth, and shock the entire city. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you won't forget. The restaurant never truly slept. Even at midnight, when the city outside slowed to a low hum and traffic lights blinked red over empty streets, Hana Noir breathed quietly, glassware clinking, soft jazz curling through the air, the faint scent of grilled meat and citrus oil lingering long after the last entree left the kitchen. Kang Min-Jae sat in his usual booth. It was not the best table in the house, but it was the smartest. From here he could see everything, every server's path, every patron's posture, every door in and out. Old habits never died, they only learned to dress better. Min-Jae wore a charcoal suit, tailored close to his broad frame, crisp white shirt open at the collar. His dark hair was neatly cut, his face calm, unreadable. To the politicians and executives dining nearby, he was simply the owner, a successful restaurateur, a discreet man with excellent taste. Only a few people in the city knew the truth. Those people never forgot it. He lifted his teacup just as the waitress approached. She moved carefully, like someone navigating a room filled with invisible wires. Her uniform fit properly, pressed and clean, but her body language told another story. Shoulders slightly curved inward, steps measured, eyes always scanning before settling. Her name was Elena Moreau. Min-Jae had noticed her 3 weeks ago when she first started. Not because she stood out, but because she didn't. In his world, invisibility was rarely accidental. She placed the teacup down with steady hands. "Here you go, sir." Her voice was soft, European accent faint but present. "French, maybe Belgian." "Thank you," Min-Jae replied. As she reached to adjust the saucer, the fabric of her sleeve slid back, just a little. Enough. The color registered instantly. Deep purple fading into yellow, shaped not like a fall or a bump, but like fingers. 4 on one side, a thumb shadow on the other. Min-Jae did not blink. He did not inhale sharply or tense his jaw. Years of discipline kept his face neutral, but inside something precise and dangerous aligned itself neatly into place. Elena froze. For a fraction of a second, her eyes flicked to his face. Panic flashed there, sharp, raw, instinctive. She yanked her sleeve down. "I'll bring your food shortly," she said too fast and turned away. Min-Jae didn't stop her. He didn't move at all, but he watched. He watched the way she walked faster now, how she kept her injured arm close to her body. He watched how she flinched when a customer laughed too loudly behind her, how she startled when a plate clattered in the kitchen. Violence always left fingerprints, even when it didn't touch skin. Min-Jae had spent his life learning how to read it. Dinner service continued. Conversations rose and fell. Wine poured. Laughter echoed. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside Min-Jae's chest, something had gone very still. Elena returned with his meal, careful, professional, eyes down. He thanked her again. She nodded and moved on. He let 10 minutes pass. Power, he had learned, was not about speed. It was about timing. When the rush thinned and the night softened into that quiet stretch between movements, Min-Jae stood. The shift was immediate. Staff straightened unconsciously. A manager glanced over. A server paused mid-step. Authority did not need to announce itself. "Elena," Min-Jae said calmly. She stopped. "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady, but her shoulders betrayed her. "Walk with me." Fear crossed her face before she could hide it. I'm still on shift." "You're not in trouble," he said evenly. 5 minutes. She hesitated, then nodded. Saying no did not feel safe. They walked toward the back hallway, past the kitchen doors, where heat and noise surged, past stainless steel and shouting cooks, into the quieter private wing reserved for management and select guests. Min-Jae opened his office door and stepped aside. "After you." The door closed behind them with a soft final click. Elena stood just inside, eyes darting, cataloging the room the way people did when they were used to danger. Her hands folded together, then unclasped, then folded again. Sit, Min-Jae said. She did, perching on the edge of the chair like someone prepared to run. You're good at your job, he began. She blinked. Thank you. You learn fast. You don't make mistakes. Customers trust you. Her breathing slowed slightly. Compliments were safer than accusation. You also hide pain well. The silence hit like a dropped knife. Elena looked down. I don't know what you mean, she said softly. Min-Jae leaned against his desk, arms crossed, not looming, not advancing. I don't tolerate abuse of my staff, he said. Not from customers, not from management, not from anyone. I'm fine, she said too quickly. I just bruise easily. Min-Jae nodded once. Then show me. Her head snapped up. What? Your wrist. No, the word came out instantly. Wrong. Elena, he said calmly, no one touches what belongs under my roof without my consent, and I don't consent to lies. Her composure cracked. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You don't understand how this works. If I say anything, show me. Her hands trembled as she pulled back the sleeve. Up close, the damage was unmistakable. Layered bruises. Different stages of healing, a map of repetition. Min-Jae felt something cold settle into his bones. Who did this? He asked. She stared at the floor. My boyfriend, she whispered. The word sounded like poison. Name, she hesitated, long enough to weigh fear against truth. Marcus Keller, Min-Jae repeated it once, quietly. How long? Almost a year. Does he know where you work? Yeah. Does he come here? Her silence answered. Min-Jae picked up his phone. She panicked instantly. Please don't call anyone. He'll kill me if he thinks I told someone. He already said if I ever embarrassed him. Min-Jae raised a hand. She stopped. You didn't embarrass him, he said. He embarrassed himself the moment he touched you. Tears slid down her face now, unrestrained. Men like him don't stop, she said. They always come back. Min-Jae looked at her fully then. I know, he said. That's why they don't get second chances. He typed a message and sent it. Sit, he said gently. No one is touching you tonight. She sat because something in his voice felt immovable. Minutes later, the door opened. Park Hyun-woo stepped inside, tall and composed, eyes sharp as glass. Yes, boss. Find Marcus Keller, Min-Jae said, quietly. Learn everything. Hyun-woo nodded. Understood. When the door closed again, Elena hugged herself. What are you doing? She asked. I'm correcting a problem, Min-Jae replied. Her voice shook. He works in finance. He knows people. He's careful. Min-Jae met her eyes. So am I, she swallowed. You don't understand, she whispered. He always finds a way. Min-Jae leaned forward slightly. No, he said. You don't understand yet. He straightened, his voice low and controlled. This city runs on rules. People pretend don't exist. Marcus Keller broke one of them. Elena looked up. He hurt someone under my protection. Her breath caught. I don't belong to you, she said instinctively. Min-Jae nodded. You're right, you belong to yourself. Then, after a pause, but while you work here, you are under my protection, and I take that seriously. She stared at him confused, frightened, hopeful all at once. What happens now? She asked. Min-Jae's gaze drifted briefly to the window overlooking the city. Now, he said, we wait. Outside, the city glittered, unaware that its balance had just shifted, and somewhere within it, Marcus Keller was still breathing. For now, the city did not change overnight. Morning still came with the same gray light crawling between buildings. Coffee shops opened. Traffic swelled. People hurried past one another, carrying private storms no one else could see. But somewhere beneath the surface, something had begun to move. Elena barely slept. She lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound, as if it were a warning. Her phone sat on the bedside table, screen dark, but she checked it every few minutes anyway. No missed calls, no messages. Marcus had not reached out. That scared her more than if he had. Marcus never stayed quiet for long. She replayed the night in her mind again and again. Min-Jae's calm voice, the way he had looked at her bruises, without pity, without disgust, the way he had said protection, as if it were a fact, not a promise. Men like him did not speak lightly. Still, Fear clung to her like damp clothes. She had learned not to trust sudden kindness. Kindness always came with conditions. By noon, she forced herself out of bed and into the shower. Hot water stung where the bruises were still tender. She dressed carefully, choosing long sleeves, despite the warming day, and left for work early. The restaurant looked the same, perfectly polished, perfectly controlled, but Elena felt different the moment she stepped inside. She could feel eyes on her, not customers, not staff, something quieter, watchful. Park Hyun-woo stood near the bar, dressed in a simple black jacket, nursing a coffee he had no intention of finishing. He gave her a brief nod, nothing more. It should have reassured her. Instead, her stomach twisted. During prep, the kitchen buzzed with routine chaos. Orders shouted, pans clanged, someone cursed in 3 languages. Elena focused on folding napkins, her hands moving automatically. Your friend came by last night, a fellow waitress murmured. Beside her, Elena stiffened. What friend? Tall guy, blonde, looked pissed, asked if you still worked here. The room tilted. When? Elena asked. After closing, management told him to leave. Marcus, her heart pounded. She glanced toward the office instinctively. Min-Jae was already there. He stood in the doorway, speaking quietly to Hyun-woo. When his eyes met Elena's, he gave a small, reassuring nod. He knew that knowledge steadied her, just enough to breathe. Service began. The hours passed with painful slowness. Elena jumped at every door opening, every voice raised in laughter. She half expected Marcus to storm in, to drag her out by the arm, to hiss threats into her ear while everyone pretended not to see. But he didn't come. What came instead was worse. Near the end of her shift, a man in a gray suit approached her station, late 30s, clean cut, the kind of face people trusted by default. Elena Moreau? He asked politely. Yes, I'm Detective Lucas Meyer, NYPD. He flashed his badge just long enough for it to register. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Her blood went cold. Min-Jae appeared beside them instantly. Is there a problem, Detective? He asked calmly. Meyer turned, surprised, then smiled. Mr. Kang, I didn't realize you were on the floor. I usually am, Min-Jae replied. What's this regarding? A domestic disturbance report, Meyer said, eyes flicking back to Elena. Filed anonymously. Elena's throat tightened. Min-Jae didn't look at her. May we speak privately? He asked. They moved to the side. I'll handle this, Min-Jae said softly to Elena. Not a question. Detective Meyer leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Look, this doesn't have to be complicated. We just need a statement. She hasn't filed a report, Min-Jae said. Someone did. Then speak to them. Meyer sighed. Mr. Kang, with all due respect, this isn't your business. Min-Jae's gaze hardened, just slightly. Everything under my roof is my business. The detective studied him for a moment, then glanced back at Elena. Miss, if you're in danger, I'm not, Elena said quickly. The lie tasted bitter. Meyer nodded slowly, unconvinced. If that changes, my card is at the front desk. He handed it over and walked away. Elena's knees felt weak. Min-Jae waited until Meyer was out of sight before turning to her. He's testing, he said. Marcus is trying to see who will protect you. Elena swallowed. He called the police on himself. Men like him don't think of it that way, Min-Jae replied. They think of it as controlling the narrative. She wrapped her arms around herself. What happens when he realizes he's losing? Min-Jae looked toward the noon again. Then he makes mistakes. That night, Marcus Keller realized something was wrong. It wasn't the police visit that had been intentional. A show, a reminder. What unsettled him was the silence afterward. No response to his texts. No returned calls. No access. He drove past the restaurant twice. The second time, he noticed the black sedan parked across the street, engine running, driver inside. He knew enough to recognize surveillance when he saw it. Marcus was not stupid. He was violent, controlling, narcissistic, but not stupid. He went home angry, and when anger didn't bring relief, fear crept in. He poured himself a drink and stared at his reflection in the glass. His jaw was still bruised from the last time Elena had fought back. She had more strength than she looked like. He'd liked that at first. Now it irritated him. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Yeah. A calm male voice replied. Stop looking for Elena. Marcus straightened. Who is this? A warning, the voice said. The only one you'll get. Marcus laughed sharply. You think I'm scared of some restaurant owner? A pause, then softly, no, you're scared because you know who I am. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone. For the first time in a long while, uncertainty replaced rage. He opened his laptop and began searching. Kang Min-Jae. The results were thin, too thin. Successful restaurateur, invest philanthropic donations. No scandals, no criminal history, but there were gaps. Marcus had spent years in finance. He knew how to read gaps. He leaned back in his chair, pulse quickening. Who the hell are you? He muttered. 2 days later, Elena came home to find the door to her apartment unlocked. Her heart slammed into her ribs. She stood frozen in the hallway, keys clenched in her fist. Marcus, she called softly. No answer. She stepped inside. Nothing was out of place, except her bedroom. The dresser drawers were open, clothes tossed aside. Her passport lay on the bed. A message had been written on the mirror in red marker. You can't hide forever. Elena backed away, panic rising. Her phone rang. Min-Jae, don't speak, he said the moment she answered. Leave your apartment now. Now. She didn't argue. She grabbed her bag and fled. A car was waiting outside before she even reached the sidewalk. Hyun-woo stepped out, opening the door. You're safe, he said. Inside the car, Elena shook uncontrollably. Min-Jae was waiting. When they arrived at a quiet, well-secured building downtown, he met her at the door. Marcus has crossed a line, he said without preamble. What happens now? She whispered. Min-Jae looked at her steadily. Now, he said, we end. Outside, the city continued its unaware rhythm, but deep within it, a reckoning had begun, and by the time it was over, no one would forget the name, Kang Min-Jae, or the woman he chose to protect. Elena did not know how long she sat in the quiet apartment before she realized she was no longer shaking. The space was nothing like her own, clean, minimal, secure in a way she could feel in her bones. The windows were reinforced glass. The door had 2 locks and a keypad. The silence was deliberate, not lonely. Min-Jae poured her a glass of water and placed it gently on the table in front of her. Drink, he said. She did. Only then did she look up at him. You knew he would come after me, she said. Yes, and you still let me go home. Min-Jae met her gaze without flinching. I needed to see how far he would go. Her chest tightened. So I was bait. You were already prey, he replied quietly. I turned you into evidence. The words landed hard. Elena stood abruptly, anger cutting through fear. You don't get to decide that for me. Min-Jae nodded once. You're right. The admission surprised her. I should have told you sooner, he continued. But if I warned you, he would have stayed careful. Men like Marcus only reveal themselves when they believe they still have control. She paced the room, running a hand through her hair. He went through my things, my passport. He wanted me scared, and now he is. Min-Jae said. She stopped. Scared of what? Min-Jae didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window and looked down at the street below, where traffic flowed calmly. Unaware of being seen, he said at last. The next morning, the city woke to a story it didn't yet understand. A financial blog published a short piece questioning irregularities in Keller and Rowe's most recent acquisitions. Nothing explosive, just enough to raise eyebrows, just enough to invite scrutiny. Marcus saw it over breakfast. He read it twice, then a third time, his jaw tightening. This is nothing, he muttered to himself. By noon, 2 more articles followed, one from an independent journalist, another from a watchdog site that specialized in corporate compliance. Patterns were being drawn. Marcus called his legal team. Contain it, he snapped. Threaten if you have to. By mid-afternoon, his assistant knocked on his office door, pale. Marcus, compliance wants to speak with you. His stomach dropped. About what? They won't say. Marcus stood, heart pounding. This was no coincidence. Someone was peeling him open slowly. Across the city, Min-Jae sat in a quiet room, beneath one of his properties, watching screens. Hyun-woo stood beside him, arms crossed. He's scrambling, Hyun-woo said, pulling strings. Let him, Min-Jae replied. The more he moves, the more he reveals. Elena watched from the doorway, uneasy. You're destroying him, she said. Min-Jae finally turned to her. No, he said. I'm letting him destroy himself.
She hesitated. What if he realizes it's you? Min-Jae's expression didn't change. He already does. As if summoned by the thought, Marcus called. Min-Jae answered on speaker. You think you're clever, Marcus snarled, digging around where you don't belong. Min-Jae's voice was calm. You entered my home. Your home, Marcus laughed bitterly. You own restaurants, Kang. You're not God. No, Min-Jae said softly, but I know people who answer to different laws. There was a pause. Then Marcus said, lower now. You touch my company again, and I swear, you'll do what? Min-Jae interrupted. Call the police. The same police who just opened a preliminary into your finances. Silence. Elena could hear Marcus breathing on the line. You think this ends with money, Marcus said. You think I don't have friends? I know you do, Min-Jae replied. That's why I started with them. The call ended. Marcus threw his phone across the room. Panic surged through him now, raw and undeniable. He drove, not to work, not home. He drove to someone he trusted, an older man in a private office, with no signage, and thick curtains. You're bleeding, the man said, after listening to Marcus rant. Fix it, Marcus demanded. The man shook his head. You don't understand. This isn't a lawsuit. This is exposure. Marcus slammed his fist on the desk. I want her back. The man leaned forward. You don't want that. Whatever you did to that woman. Stop. Marcus stared at him. You're scared. Yes, the man admitted, and so should you be. That night, Elena sat alone in the apartment Min-Jae had given her, staring at her phone. She hadn't told anyone where she was, not her coworkers, not the friend she barely kept. Her life had narrowed to this moment. Min-Jae knocked lightly and entered. I arranged for you to take leave, he said. Paid, no questions. I didn't ask for that, she replied. I know. She looked at him. Why are you really doing this? He considered her for a long moment. Because someone once looked away, he said. And I decided I never would. She searched his face. Who? He didn't answer. The city didn't erupt all at once. It cracked. A subpoena here, a whistleblower there, an anonymous source leaking internal emails. By the end of the week, Marcus Keller's name was everywhere. Talk show, headlines, rumors, and then came the photos. Not of Elena, of bruises on another woman's arm, dated years earlier, settled quietly, buried. The pattern became undeniable. Public sympathy turned cold. Marcus locked himself in his apartment, curtains drawn, phone buzzing non-stop. He knew he was losing. The only thing he still wanted was control, and control meant Elena. Meanwhile, Min-Jae stood on a balcony overlooking the city, phone pressed to his ear. It's time, he said. Below, the city lights glimmered. Tomorrow, the truth would stop whispering. Tomorrow, it would speak, and when it did, it would shake everything. The city did not sleep that night. By dawn, Marcus Keller's name was no longer whispered with respect. It was spoken with disbelief, then disgust, then rage. News anchors stopped hedging their language. Commentators stopped calling the accusations allegations, and began saying patterns. Former associates began distancing themselves publicly, releasing statements written by lawyers who had already smelled blood. Marcus watched it all from his dark apartment, television flickering like a courtroom fire. Every screen showed his face, not the polished headshots he had paid for, not the confident smile from Investor Summit, but candid images, jaw clenched, eyes sharp, caught mid-sentence, leaving buildings he no longer controlled. His phone rang again. He didn't answer. He already knew who it was. Across the city, Min-Jae stood in a quiet office, overlooking the river. The glass walls reflected the morning light, sharp and unforgiving. Hyun-woo stood nearby, scrolling through updates on a tablet. He's unraveling faster than expected, Hyun-woo said. 3 board members resigned overnight. The 4th is negotiating immunity. Min-Jae nodded once. And Keller, isolated, no official security, no allies answering calls. Min-Jae exhaled slowly. Good, he said. Then he'll do something stupid. Elena sat in the adjacent room, knees drawn up, watching the same coverage on mute. She recognized the cadence of Marcus's public downfall, the rise and fall of his voice in old clips. She had heard those tones in private for years. Calm authority when he was pleased, tight control when he wasn't. The door opened. Min-Jae entered quietly. It's starting, he said. She didn't look at him. I know. He sat across from her, leaving space. He's desperate now, Min-Jae continued, which means he's dangerous. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her sweater. He won't stop. No, Min-Jae agreed. He won't. The knock came less than an hour later, not at the apartment, at the restaurant. Min-Jae's phone buzzed with an alert from security. Hyun-woo glanced at the screen and frowned. He's here. Min-Jae stood immediately. Where? Front entrance. Alone. Elena's breath caught. No, she said. He wouldn't. He would, Min-Jae interrupted calmly, because this is the last place he thinks he still has power. They arrived within minutes. The restaurant was closed, but the lights were on. Staff had been told to stay home. Security lined the perimeter discreetly, blending into the morning crowd outside. Marcus Keller stood at the front doors, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, hair undone. He looked smaller than Elena remembered, stripped of confidence, stripped of cert. When Min-Jae stepped inside, Marcus turned sharply. You think you've won, Marcus said, voice hoarse. You think this spectacle makes you righteous. Min-Jae stopped a few feet away. This isn't about righteousness, he replied. It's about consequence. Marcus laughed bitterly. You orchestrated this. I allowed the truth to surface. You destroyed my life, Marcus snapped. Min-Jae's gaze was steady. You destroyed your own. Marcus's eyes flicked past him. Elena, he called. You don't have to hide. She stepped forward despite herself. Min-Jae didn't stop her. Marcus's face softened instantly, the familiar mask sliding back into place. There you are, he said gently. Come home. We can fix this. Elena felt her chest tighten. You can't fix what you broke, she said. Marcus shook his head. You're confused. You've been manipulated. He filled your head with stories. Min-Jae watched silently. You're safe with me, Marcus continued. I always protected you. A sharp laugh escaped her before she could stop it. You hurt me, she said, voice trembling but clear. You scared me. You made me disappear. Marcus's jaw clenched. You were dramatic. The word hung in the air. Min-Jae stepped forward then. That, he said quietly, is where this ends. Marcus turned on him, rage flaring. You think you're better than me, Marcus spat. You run a criminal empire behind polished menus. Yes, Min-Jae said simply, and I never pretended otherwise. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Marcus's eyes darted. You called the police, he hissed. No, Min-Jae replied. I called accountability. From the corner of the street, cameras appeared, reporters, phones raised, live streams, already rolling. Marcus realized too late. This wasn't a private confrontation. This was public reckoning. Detective units arrived moments later, not uniformed beat cops, but internal affairs and federal investigators. Badges flashed, warrants read aloud. Marcus backed away. This is harassment, he shouted. I demand. Marcus Keller, an agent, interrupted. You are under arrest for obstruction, intimidation, and multiple counts pending further investigation. Elena watched as cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. He turned to her, panic cracking his voice. Elena, please. She stepped forward. For years, she said quietly, you told me no one would believe me. She met his eyes. They do now. The cameras captured everything. The city watched. Marcus Keller was led away shouting, unraveling, finally small. The crowd buzzed. Min-Jae stood beside Elena, close but not touching. It's not over, she whispered. No, he agreed, but the hardest part is done. Later that night, the city erupted. Protests, support, women coming forward, stories pouring out like a dam breaking. The restaurant became a symbol overnight, a place where silence had been broken. Elena sat alone on the balcony of Min-Jae's penthouse, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city glow beneath her. Min-Jae joined her quietly. You don't owe me anything, he said. She nodded. I know. After a long pause she spoke. I don't know who I am without fear. Min-Jae looked at her then, really looked. Then you get to find out, he said, at your pace. She turned toward him. And you, he smiled faintly. I already know who I am. She studied him. A man who shocked the city.
No, he said softly. A man who refused to look away. The city below roared with life, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. Power had been challenged, silence had been broken, and tomorrow, everything would change again. The arrest did not bring silence. It brought noise. For 3 straight days, the city churned like an exposed nerve. News vans crowded sidewalks, podcasts dissected every detail, analysts argued about power, consent, class, race, influence. Every conversation circled back to the same point: how a man like Marcus Keller had been allowed to operate untouched for so long, and why it took someone like Min-Jae Park to stop him. Elena learned quickly that survival after truth was its own kind of battle. She could no longer move anonymously. Her name wasn't public, but her face was, blurred at first, then sharper as people connected dots. Someone leaked an old photo from a charity gala, another from the restaurant, taken before everything changed. She stopped going outside alone, not because she was afraid of Marcus anymore, but because everyone suddenly wanted something from her. She sat in Min-Jae's living room, phone face down on the table, unread notifications stacked like bricks. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said quietly. Min-Jae poured tea, set it in front of her. "No one ever does," he replied. "Truth is loud." She rubbed her temples. "They want statements, interviews. They want me to be a symbol. You don't have to be." She looked at him. "But if I'm not, someone else will speak for me." Min-Jae didn't answer immediately. He had been navigating his own storm. City officials had begun asking questions, not about Marcus, but about him, his influence, his reach, his businesses. The same city that now praised his intervention also feared what it revealed: power that acted without permission. Unsettled people. Hyun-woo entered the room, tablet in hand. "We have a problem," he said. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. "Which one?" "The council is moving faster than expected. They're pushing a public inquiry into private influence over civic outcomes." Elena frowned. "Is that about Marcus?" "It's about Min-Jae," Hyun-woo corrected. "They can't touch Keller without acknowledging who exposed him, and they don't like that answer." Min-Jae nodded slowly. "They're going to try to turn me into the villain," he said calmly. "That was always the price." Elena stood. "Then I won't let them." He turned sharply. "This is not your fight. It is if they're using me as the excuse." She met his gaze. "Steady now. I spent years being quiet, so powerful men could stay comfortable. I'm done." Silence filled the room. Hyun-woo cleared his throat. "There's more." Min-Jae gestured. "Say it." "Marcus Keller requested a meeting," Hyun-woo said, through his attorney, "with Elena." Elena felt her stomach drop. "No," she said immediately. Min-Jae didn't hesitate. "Absolutely not. He's claiming procedural violations," Hyun-woo continued. "Says Elena's testimony, or lack of public denial, has influenced jurors, investors, investigator. That's not how." Elena stopped herself. "He wants to see me," she said slowly, "to control the narrative." Min-Jae stepped closer. "You do not owe him closure." "I know," she said, "but I owe myself something." Min-Jae searched her face. "What?" "Proof," she said, "that I can look at him and not disappear." He shook his head. "That's not strength. That's reopening a wound." She took his hand. "It's choosing how it heals." The meeting was scheduled under heavy supervision. Neutral location, glass wall, 2 attorneys present, recording equipment running. Marcus Keller looked nothing like the man she remembered. He had lost weight. His posture sagged. His eyes darted instead of commanding space. When Elena entered, he stood reflexively, then froze. "You look well," he said. She didn't respond. They sat. Minutes passed. Finally, Marcus spoke. "They're destroying me," he said quietly. She waited. "I made mistakes," he continued, "but this has gone too far." She tilted her head. "You still don't hear it." Marcus frowned. "Hear what?" "You're talking about consequences like they're an injustice." His lips pressed thin. "You benefited from this," he snapped. "From the attention. From sympathy." She felt the old anger rise, and then pass. "No," she said calmly. "I survived in spite of you." Marcus leaned forward. "You let that man use you." Elena smiled faintly. "You don't get to define my agency anymore." His composure cracked. "You think he cares?" Marcus hissed. You're a headline to him. Elena leaned in. No, I'm a line he refused to cross. Marcus stared. She stood. This meeting is over. As guards opened the door, Marcus spoke one last time. You're making him a target. She paused. Good, she said. So was I. Outside, Min-Jae waited. She walked straight into his arms. I did it, she whispered. He held her without question. Across the city, the backlash intensified. An anonymous op-ed questioned Min-Jae's motives. Another implied coercion. A third suggested Elena had been manipulated. Min-Jae read every word. Then he closed the file. They want war, Hyun-woo said. Min-Jae looked out over the city. No, he replied. They want control. And you, he turned. I want balance. The next move was unexpected. Min-Jae stepped into the light, not with denials, but with transparency. He invited regulators into select operations, opened books where it mattered, drew a clear line between his legal enterprises and the world he never pretended didn't exist. He didn't confess. He contextualized. The city didn't know what to do with that. Elena watched from the sidelines, understanding now the weight he carried. You didn't have to do this, she said one night. He shrugged. Power survives exposure when it's honest. She studied him. You're changing, she said. He smiled. So are you. Outside, the city kept moving. Marcus Keller's trial loomed. More names surfaced. More stories followed. And somewhere between fear and freedom, Elena began to imagine a future, not defined by what she escaped, but by what she chose. The story was far from over. The courthouse had never been louder. By the time Elena arrived, the plaza outside was already packed with cameras, protest signs, whispered arguments, and people pretending they hadn't come just to watch history crack open. Security pushed a narrow path through the crowd, and still voices reached her. Say her name. Justice for the waitresses. Elena Keller, tell the truth. She flinched at the last one. The surname still tasted wrong in her mouth, even after everything. Inside, the air changed, cooler, sharper, built for order, not emotion. Min-Jae walked beside her, silent but solid. He didn't touch her, not yet. He knew better. This moment belonged to her. The courtroom doors opened. Marcus Keller was already seated at the defense table. He didn't look at her. That hurt more than she expected. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Wood struck wood. Order settled like a held breath. This was it. The prosecutor began with confidence, methodical and precise, timeline, pattern, abuse of power framed not as passion or error, but as strategy. Elena listened without reacting. She had lived this story. Hearing it spoken aloud didn't shock her. It clarified it. Then the defense stood, and everything shifted. Marcus's attorney was smooth, practiced, dangerous in a quiet way. He didn't deny the bruises. He didn't deny the relationship. He didn't even deny that boundaries had been crossed. He reframed them. Two adults, he said, voice calm. A complicated relationship. No formal complaint at the time. No medical records filed. No police report until after Mr. Park's involvement. Elena's jaw tightened. And that, the attorney continued, raises the question, was this about justice or influence? A ripple moved through the room. Min-Jae didn't move. The attorney turned slightly, gesturing toward him without looking. A powerful man intervened. A vulnerable woman's story suddenly gains momentum. Charges appear. Reputations collapse. And now we are asked to believe this was organic. The implication was clear. Elena felt heat rise in her chest. This was the danger Min-Jae had warned her about, weaponizing doubt. The judge called for a recess. In the hallway, Elena finally turned to Min-Jae. They're going to blame you, she said. He nodded. They already are. She swallowed. If I testify, really testify, they'll tear me apart. Yes. And if I they'll say you were silenced. She laughed bitterly. So I lose either way. Min-Jae looked at her, expression steady. No, he said. You win by telling the truth on your terms. The courtroom reconvened. The prosecutor stood again. The state calls Elena Rossi to the stand. The room froze. Elena stood. Her legs trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She took the oath, sat, looked straight ahead. The prosecutor's voice softened. Rossi, can you tell the court how you met the defendant? She answered simply, no drama, no flourish, work, meetings, escalation. When asked about the bruises, her voice didn't shake. When I tried to leave, she said, he reminded me who he was. The defense objected. Overrule. What did that mean to you? The prosecutor asked. It meant the law was on his side, Elena said, and silence was on mine. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Then the defense stood. Rossi, the attorney said, gently, isn't it true you continued working at the restaurant after meeting Mr. Park? Yes. And isn't it true he provided security, legal access, housing? Yes. So, would you agree that your circumstances improved after his involvement? Elena looked directly at him. My circumstances improved after I stopped being afraid. The attorney paused. Did Mr. Park ever suggest you accuse Mr. Keller? No. Did he coach your statements? No. Did he benefit from? Elena thought of Min-Jae opening his books, taking heat, standing beside her without controlling her. He lost more than he gained, she said. Silence followed. Then the attorney tried one last angle. You're aware Mr. Park has a reputation? Elena nodded. And you trust him? She turned, just slightly, and looked at Min-Jae. Yes, she said, because when he saw what was happening to me, he stopped it, not quietly, not conveniently. He made it impossible to ignore. The judge leaned forward. That will be all, she said. Elena stepped down. Min-Jae met her halfway. This time he took her hand. Outside, the city reacted in real time. Clips spread, headlines reframed, doubt softened into respect. Inside the courtroom, Marcus Keller finally looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The trial was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted. The city had seen her, and it could not unsee her again. By nightfall, the city had chosen sides. Elena watched it happen from the quiet of Min-Jae's penthouse. The skyline stretched wide, beneath the glass like a living thing. Screens glowed everywhere, phones, tablets, muted televisions, each replaying fragments of her testimony, her voice, her face, her words, justice or manipulation, victim or pawn, courage or orchestration. The questions moved faster than truth ever could. Min-Jae stood, a few steps away, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. He hadn't spoken in several minutes. That worried her more than if he had. They're coming for you next, Elena said, quietly. He didn't deny it. They already have, he replied. They were just waiting for permission. As if summoned, his phone vibrated on the counter. He glanced at it once, then set it face down. Media, she asked. Prosecutors, he said. And people who pretend they aren't. Elena exhaled slowly. I never wanted this to become about you. Min-Jae turned toward her fully now. It was always going to, he said. The moment I refused to let you disappear quietly. She studied his face. The calm control, the faint fatigue around his eye. A man used to pressure, but not this kind. This wasn't territory or profit. This was narrative, morality, public judgment. They're going to paint you as the villain who decided to play hero, she said. And you, he replied, as the woman who benefited from it. She nodded. They already are. A knock came at the door. Not security, not staff. Mateo. Min-Jae opened it without hesitation. Mateo stepped inside, expression tight. It's starting. How bad? Min-Jae asked. Bad enough to be interested. He laid a tablet on the table and pulled up a news clip. A well-dressed man spoke directly into the camera, tone grave. While we support accountability, the commentator said, we must ask whether vigilante influence is undermining due process. Park's involvement raises serious concerns, especially given his known connections. Elena stiffened. They're reframing you as the threat, she said. Mateo nodded. They're calling for an inquiry, not just into Keller, into us. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. How long, he asked. 48 hours, Mateo replied. Before subpoenas, before hearings, before they drag every closed door open. Elena looked between them. And if they do? Min-Jae didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was measured. Then the city learns exactly how much it's been protected by men it pretends not to know. Mateo's gaze sharpened.
That's a nuclear option. Yes, and it will burn you too. Min-Jae met his eyes. I know. Silence fell. Elena stood slowly. Then don't do it for me, she said. If it destroys you, don't. Min-Jae looked at her, something unreadable passing through his expression. This isn't about sacrifice, he said. It's about refusing to flinch. She shook her head. There has to be another way. There isn't, Mateo said, quietly. They only respect leverage. Elena turned back to Min-Jae. Then let me speak again, she said, publicly, without protection, without spin. Both men reacted at once. No, Min-Jae said. That's reckless, Mateo added. Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. They're saying I was controlled, she said. That my story only mattered because you backed it. So let me stand alone. Let me say it again, without you beside me. Min-Jae stepped closer. That puts you at risk. I've lived at risk, she replied. This time I choose it. He searched her face, seeing something he couldn't command or shield. Resolve. You don't owe anyone this, he said. She smiled faintly. I owe myself. Mateo watched them both, then exhaled. If she does this, it changes the board. Min-Jae closed his eyes briefly. When? He asked. Tomorrow, Elena said. Morning. Min-Jae nodded once. Then I'll make sure no one touches you. She stepped into him then, not for protection, but ground. His hand rested at her back, steady and warm. Outside, sirens cut through the night. The city kept moving, unaware it was on the edge of something irreversible. By morning the narrative would fracture again, and this time Elena would be the one holding the blame. Morning didn't arrive gently. It came with noise, cameras, and consequences. Elena stood alone behind the podium in the press room of the Civic Center, the air thick with anticipation, and perfume and electricity. The room was packed, journalists shoulder to shoulder, lenses stacked like weapons, microphones angled forward as if ready to strike. She wore a simple dark coat, no jewelry, no makeup beyond what hid the worst of the bruising that still lingered faintly along her wrist and jaw. Not a ray, just softened. Min-Jae was not beside her. That fact alone had already changed the tone. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Where's Park? Did he pull support? Is this a setup? Elena placed both hands on the podium. She waited until the noise dulled into uneasy quiet. Then she spoke. My name is Elena Moreau, she said, voice steady, clear. I'm here because for years, silence was safer than truth, and because today, that stops. No theatrics, no shaking, just calm. I worked as a waitress, I lived quietly, and I was abused by a man who believed his title placed him above consequence. Cameras clicked faster. I didn't come forward because I was protected by power, she continued. I came forward because I was tired of surviving in fragments. A reporter raised a hand, already speaking. Miss Moreau, are you referring to? I'm not taking questions yet, Elena said gently. Please let me finish. The room obeyed. I've been told my voice only mattered once a powerful man decided to listen, that my story became real, only when it was useful. She paused, eyes scanning the room. That's not how truth works. Somewhere at the back, a journalist shifted uncomfortably. I came forward because what happened to me has happened to others, because systems fail quietly, because violence doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like fear you learn to hide. She lifted her wrist, just enough for the faint marks to be seen. I'm not here to defend Min-Jae Park, she said. He doesn't need me to. I'm here to say that if the city is shocked by what he did next, it's only because it's forgotten what protection looks like. A murmur spread. I am not owned. I was not instructed, and I am not grateful for rescue. I am grateful for space to speak, to be believed, to survive. She stepped back. I'm finished. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. Then the room erupted. Questions collided. Voices overlapped. Names were shouted. Elena didn't answer a single one. She turned and walked off the stage. Across the city, Min-Jae watched the broadcast in silence. Mateo stood near the window, phone vibrating non-stop on the table. She did exactly what you feared, Mateo said, and exactly what you needed. Min-Jae didn't respond. On screen, A panel of commentators argued in real time. She just dismantled the narrative, one said. No handler, no script, that wasn't coached, that was resolve. Min-Jae exhaled slowly. She's stronger than they think, Mateo added. Yes, Min-Jae said, and now they'll test it. As if on cue, his phone rang. Unknown number, he answered. This is Special Counsel Rivera, the voice said, calm, sharp. We need to speak. I'm listening, Min-Jae replied. You're being asked to testify regarding interference, Rivera continued, and influence. Voluntary cooperation would be advisable. Min-Jae smiled faintly. About which part? He asked. The protection, or the secrets the city buried long before I noticed them. A pause. You understand the risk you're taking, Rivera said. I've understood it for years, Min-Jae replied. You're just catching up. He ended the call. Mateo stared at him. That was fast. They needed to respond, Min-Jae said. She forced their hand. And now, Min-Jae walked to the window, looking down at the city waking up beneath him. Now, he said, they decide whether they want controlled exposure or collapse. Elena didn't go home. She went somewhere smaller, quieter, a borrowed apartment, overlooking a narrow street, sunlight cutting through dust motes and half-drawn curtains. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone buzzing beside her, messages, support, hate, gratitude, threats, all of it blurred together. A knock came at the door. She froze, then a familiar voice. It's me. She opened it. Min-Jae stood there, alone, no guards, no entourage, just him. They looked at each other for a long moment. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know, he replied. She stepped aside anyway. He entered, taking in the simplicity of the place. You were brilliant, he said. She shrugged. I was honest. That's rarer. She sat again. He remained standing. They're coming for you, she said quietly. They already were, he replied. She looked up at him. I didn't do that for you. I know, I did it because I refused to be reduced to an accessory. He nodded. And you were. Silence settled between them, heavy, but not uncomfortable. Finally she spoke. What happens when this ends? He considered the question carefully. It won't end cleanly, he said. It never does. And us, he met her eye. That depends on whether you want me there when it does. She studied him. The danger, the restraint, the man who chose exposure over silence. I don't need saving, she said. I know, he replied. That's why I stayed. She stood, closing the distance between them. Then don't disappear, she said. Not now. I won't, he promised. Outside the city reacted. Protests forming. Investigations opening, names being spoken that had never been spoken aloud. The shockwaves had begun, and this time, they weren't stopping at one man. The inquiry didn't wait for permission. By noon, subpoenas had landed like blunt instruments across the city, on desks polished by decades of influence, inside offices that had never expected daylight. What began as a question of one man's actions, widened into a reckoning no one had planned for. Min-Jae Park sat at the long oak table, in the hearing chamber, posture calm, hands folded, expression unreadable. Cameras lined the walls. Observers filled the gallery. The city had tuned in. Across from him sat people who had spent their lives pretending not to know his name. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Mr. Park, you understand you are under oath. I do, Min-Jae replied evenly. You are known to have significant, unofficial influence within the city. A polite phrase, a lie dressed as decorum. Min-Jae nodded. That's one way to describe it. A ripple moved through the room. The chairwoman continued. We are investigating whether your actions interfered with due process, intimidated witnesses, or obstructed justice. Min-Jae lifted his eyes. Which action would you like to start with? A murmur, a pause. The first prosecutor leaned forward. You provided protection to a civilian without authorization. I provided safety, Min-Jae said. Authorization failed her. You coordinated surveillance. I observed patterns the system ignored. You leveraged private information. I exposed crimes the city buried. The prosecutor stiffened. You are not above the law, Mr. Park. Min-Jae's gaze didn't waver. Neither was the man who hurt her. Silence pressed down hard. From the gallery, Elena watched, hands clasped tightly in her lap. This was the cost he'd warned her about. The room shifted tactics. Mr. Park, another voice cut in, sharper. Are you a criminal? Min-Jae considered the question. Yes, he said simply. Gasped. Cameras surged forward. I've never denied it, he continued. I operate in spaces the city pretends don't exist. I profit where others look away, but I do not confuse profit with cruelty. The chairwoman frowned. That distinction is not yours to make. It is when the system refuses to, Min-Jae replied. The prosecutor scoffed. So you appoint yourself judge? No, Min-Jae said. I remove shields. A journalist scribbled furiously. Elena felt her chest tighten. They were cornering him now. And yet, the prosecutor continued, your intervention conveniently eliminated a man who threatened your interest. Min-Jae tilted his head. He threatened a woman who worked for you, who was human. The prosecutor slammed a file onto the table. Enough. Let's talk about leverage. Let's talk about the information you hold on half this room. The chamber froze. Min-Jae didn't blink. You mean the records of bribery, intimidation, and silence? He asked calmly. Yes, let's talk about those. The chairwoman banged the gavel. Mr. Park, this is not the forum for. You invited me, Min-Jae said quietly. Don't pretend you didn't know what I'd bring. A heavy stillness settled. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. This was the moment. Everything could burn. Min-Jae leaned back slightly. You can indict me, he continued. You can dismantle my operations. You can make an example of me, to reassure yourselves that the city still works. He leaned forward again. But if you do it without cleaning your own hands first, everything I have becomes public. A prosecutor laughed nervously. Is that a threat? No, Min-Jae said. It's a guarantee. The room erupted. Gavel strikes, shouted objections. Recess called. As officials rushed into whispered clusters, Min-Jae remained seated, unmoved. Elena stood in the gallery, heart pounding. She didn't know whether to be terrified or proud. Outside, the city fractured. Protests grew louder. Names trended. Allies turned cautious. Enemies sharpened their knives. Elena's phone buzzed endlessly. Some messages thanked her for speaking. Others blamed her for the chaos. One read, simply, you started something you can't finish. She closed the screen. Min-Jae emerged from the chamber flanked by guards, not his. Federal. He spotted her instantly. Their eyes met across the chaos. He shook his head slightly. Not here. She understood. That night the city felt tighter, louder, edgier. Elena stood at the window of the borrowed apartment, watching patrol lights flash down the street below. A knock came at the door. She didn't jump this time. Min-Jae entered quietly, jacket loosened, fatigue finally visible. They'll stall, he said. They always do. And then, she asked, then they'll decide who they're willing to sacrifice. She swallowed. You, he nodded. Possibly. She turned fully toward him. You don't regret it? No, even now, especially now. She stepped closer. They'll try to make you disappear quietly. I know, and if they can't, he met her gaze, then they'll try to make you the reason. Her breath caught. You said this wasn't about sacrifice. It wasn't, he replied. It was about choice. She shook her head. I won't let them destroy you to erase their guilt. You may not have a choice. She lifted her chin. Then, neither do they. Min-Jae studied her, something fierce and careful in his eyes. You're changing the game, he said. So did you, she replied. A beat. There's something you should know, he said finally. Her stomach tightened. What? There are files I haven't released. About whom? About why the city stayed silent. She frowned. You mean corruption? He shook his head. I mean fear. He took a breath. And about the night your bruises were first noticed. The man who hurt you wasn't acting alone. Elena's world tilted. What do you mean? Min-Jae met her eyes grim. I mean the city let him do it. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came in fragments. Documents slid across tables by hands that trembled. Recordings played behind closed doors. Names whispered by people who had learned too late that silence was not safety. Elena sat across from Min-Jae in the dim apartment. As the final file opened on the tablet between them, she didn't cry, she didn't scream, she simply stared as the last pieces aligned. The man who hurt her had been protected, not because he was powerful alone, but because he had been useful. He enforced quiet. He reminded women what happened when they spoke. He made examples without leaving fingerprints, and when complaints surfaced, they were buried by people who didn't want their donors questioned, their careers paused, their reputations bruised.
The city hadn't just failed her, it had chosen him. Elena exhaled slowly. So when I thought I escaped, you didn't, Min-Jae said quietly. They let you believe you did. They assumed fear would finish the job. She closed her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena stood. Min-Jae looked up. Where are you going? To end it. He rose instantly. Elena, she turned, calm and unafraid in a way that startled him. No more shadows. No more intermediaries. You've protected me long enough. This will burn everything, he warned. Including me. She stepped closer. You told me once power means nothing if it doesn't protect. Now let me use mine. He searched her face for hesitation. There was none, only resolve. The press conference didn't happen on marble steps or behind a podium. It happened in daylight, in a public square, streamed live without filters. Elena stood alone at the microphone. No security visible, no scripts, just truth. She spoke slowly, clearly. She named names. She described patterns. She told the city exactly how fear was manufactured, traded, and enforced. She showed proof, not everything Min-Jae held, just enough. The city froze. Then it shattered. Officials resigned within hours. Investigations multiplied. Warrants followed. And finally, arrests. The man who hurt her was wheeled into court in handcuffs, stripped of titles, stripped of allies. For the first time, he looked small. Elena didn't watch him. She watched the women behind her. They stood in rows, silent, unafraid. Min-Jae Park was arrested 2 days later. No dramatic chase, no resistance. He turned himself in. The charges were heavy, real, impossible to ignore. The city needed a price. And Min-Jae had always known he would be it. The trial was quieter than the chaos he'd caused. No spectacle, no grandstanding. When asked if he regretted his actions, Min-Jae answered simply, no. When asked if he would do it again, he said, yes. And when asked why, he looked toward Elena in the gallery, because someone had to. The city changed slowly, painfully, imperfectly. Some reforms stuck, others faltered, but something fundamental had shifted. Fear no longer felt inevitable. Elena testified once. She didn't need to say more. The rest of the women carried it forward. Min-Jae was sentenced. Not lightly, but not erased. The judge paused before delivering the final words. You are not a hero, she said. Min-Jae nodded. I never claimed to be, but you are not what this court expected either. No, he agreed. I never. On her last visit, Elena sat across from him in the quiet room. He looked thinner, older, but peaceful. They're asking me to help consult on policy, she said softly. Survivor advocacy. He smiled faintly. Good. You're better at changing systems than burning them. She reached across the table, resting her hand over his. They still call you a criminal. They should. They also call you a monster. He met her eyes. Do they call you afraid? She shook her head. Then we did something right. The guard cleared his throat. Time. Elena stood. I won't forget you. Min-Jae's voice was gentle. I didn't save you, Elena. She paused. You reminded the city it had a conscience. He continued. That was always your power. She smiled, tears finally falling. When she turned to leave, he added, live loudly. She nodded. I will. Years later, the story would be told many ways. Some would call it corruption exposed. Others would call it justice delayed. Some would focus on the Mafia boss who crossed a line. But those who knew the truth understood something deeper. A city was changed, not by violence, but by refusal. Refusal to stay silent, refusal to disappear, refusal to accept protection as ownership. Elena never hid again. And Min-Jae Park, behind concrete and steel, slept knowing that for once in his life, power had been used, not to take, but to give back something priceless. A voice, a choice, and a city that would never look away the same way again. Cities don't change all at once. They don't wake up better. They shift slowly, like a bruise fading, never gone, just no longer hidden. In the months after the trial, downtown looked the same towers, same restaurants, same polished lie of progress. But something in the air had altered. Conversations paused more often. People listened longer. Men with power checked doors they used to leave open. Fear had lost its monopoly. Elena Moreau learned this first. She no longer worked at Hananwa, not because she was pushed out. Min-Jae had made sure the restaurant would always be hers if she wanted it, but because the building held too many echoes. She chose something smaller, a non-profit office with uneven floors and sunlight that came in too strong through cheap blinds. She helped women file reports, sit through interviews, breathe through tremors that didn't show up on paperwork. She never told them to be brave, she told them to be precise. Fear lies, she would say, but your body remembers truth. Listen to it. Her name never became a headline again. She refused interviews, declined book deals, let others argue about symbolism and power and morality. She focused on outcomes. 3 years later, domestic abuse reporting in the city rose sharply, not because violence increased, but because silence decreased. Prosecutors quietly admitted conviction rates improved when victims were believed early. Corporations rewrote internal conduct policies, not out of conscience, but out of fear of exposure. Fear redirected could be useful. Kang Min-Jae watched all of this from behind concrete and schedules and measured time. Prison did not break him, it clarified him. He was placed in a facility far from the city, one designed to hold men who knew how systems worked, men who didn't scream, men who calculated even regret. Min-Jae kept his head down, read constantly, exercised alone, spoke rarely. Other inmates sensed it immediately. This was not a man to test casually. Violence avoided him not because he threatened it, but because he understood it too well. Once a month, Elena visited. They didn't talk about the past. They talked about what came next. They passed the whistleblower protection amendment, she told him once, sliding into the chair across the table. Quietly, no press. Min-Jae nodded. Good, quiet laws last longer. Another time, 2 judges resigned last week. No scandal, just gone. He smiled faintly. The city prefers amputation to infection. Their conversations were never sentimental. No apologies, no declarations. They understood each other without needing to simplify what they were, or what they had cost. On her last visit before his transfer, Elena brought no news. She just sat. Do you ever wonder, she asked finally, if it was worth it? Min-Jae didn't answer immediately. He looked through the glass, past the guard, past the room, as if the city were still somewhere he could see. Every system runs on borrowed silence, he said. I stopped paying interest. She nodded. That was enough. Min-Jae Park was released after 8 years. No ceremony, no headlines, no redemption arc, neatly packaged for consumption. He stepped out of the facility in a gray coat, thinner now, slower but intent. The city did not welcome him back. It watched. He didn't return to his restaurants, didn't reclaim old territory. He moved quietly through private channels, consulting on security ethics, labor protections, conflict mitigation. The irony was not lost on anyone who knew who he used to be. Power, when stripped of ego, became something else entirely. He and Elena met again for the first time outside prison at a cafe far from downtown. No guards, no secrecy, just 2 people who had already survived the worst version of public attention. You could have disappeared, she said. I did, he replied. Just not completely. She smiled. Good.
They didn't speak often after that. They didn't need to. Some bonds weren't maintained by proximity but by alignment. They were parallel lines, never merging, never separating. The city told their story badly. Some versions painted Min-Jae as a criminal who happened to do one good thing. Others framed Elena as a victim who became a symbol. Both were lazy. Both missed the point. The truth was quieter. A man noticed bruises and refused to look away. A woman chose visibility over safety. And a city learned too late, but not irreversibly, that power without conscience is just organized harm. Years later, a young waitress would pause while adjusting her sleeve during a shift at a different restaurant. Her manager would notice, ask gently, offer resource, believe her the first time. No headlines followed, no shock, just intervention, and that in the end was the real aftermath. Not the fall of a powerful abuser, not the exposure of a hidden empire, but the normalization of care, the refusal to excuse harm because it's inconvenient, the understanding that silence is never neutral. The city didn't become good, it became awake, and once awake it could no longer pretend it hadn't seen.